Hello and welcome to the second round in the public sector debate competition. I'm Aniki Clark, communication lead in the TIU, and I'm your host for the match. We're very happy to have you join us, be it here at our offices in Saxor or via our social media platforms. The competition got off to a great start a couple of weeks ago with round one, and today we have round two, right? Teams, you ready? Awesome. We are entering preliminary round two, and in this extra round, we have modified the competition in previous years to give teams more opportunity to debate. At the end of this round, the top 16 teams will move on to the octafinals. So this is a deciding round. Yeah? So we're bringing our best game today. Yeah, man. But if you missed any of the action from round one, you can always catch up on our social media platforms on Facebook or on YouTube. Today we have the Real Estate Board as the proponent and the Cannabis Licensing Authority as the opponent. And they will be debating the MOOT, be it resolved that the environmental costs of ecotourism outweigh its benefits. Let me read that again. Be it resolved that the environmental cost of ecotourism outweigh its benefits. A big discussion, and we're expecting some really nice arguments. But before we get into that, I will invite the teams to introduce themselves, starting with the proponent, the Real Estate Board.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Teswayne Richards.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Damon Wilson, and I'll be your second speaker.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tiffany Warren, and I'll be your first speaker.
Thank you so much, Team Real Estate Board, and I will now invite Team Cannabis Licensing Authority to introduce themselves.
Good morning, everyone. I am Stacey Ann Johnson McIntosh.
Good morning. My name is Reinhard Stamp.
Is Theo Clayton.
Awesome. So the teams are no longer strangers to each other or to you, our viewers online, and those of you joining us here. Our judges are from our partners, the Jamaican Association for Debating and Empowerment, JADE. And I will now invite the judges to introduce themselves.
Pleasant morning, everyone. My name is Dravon Downey, and I'll be serving as the chair adjudicator for this match.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kenisha Nelson, and I'll be one of your wing judges this morning.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Diego Nelson, and I also serve as a wing adjudicator.
Thank you so much, judges. And at this point, I will hand over to you to marshal the match. Good luck, teams. And I will be sitting in to listen to the arguments as they unfold. All the best.
All right, so thank you, Aniki. Just before we get the match underway, just want to remind you briefly of what the rules are. So you are allotted your speaking times of 7, 6, and 5 minutes respectively after the first submission of both. After the first speaker on both sides, we'll enter a period of cross-examination, and we'll follow suit after the second pair of speeches. I'll explain the rules more in depth when we get there, and in your protected times, you're not allowed POIs, but outside of protected time, POIs are allowed. I think we're all quite familiar and acquainted with the rules, so without further ado, let's welcome the first speaker on side proposition. Hear, hear.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning again, Madam Speaker, honorable judges, esteemed opponents, and respected audience. I'm the first speaker. Be it resolved that the environmental cost of tourism outweighs benefits. The second speaker will give examples of the issues of ecotourism locally and internationally. And the third speaker will summarize all the points and arguments made. As the first speaker for the proposition, I will define the motion clearly, establish the framework of our argument, and present the core reasons why ecotourism, despite its promising image, is doing more harm than good to Jamaica's environment. Let us begin by clarifying some key terms. Ecotourism is defined as a form of nature-oriented tourism intended to contribute to the conservation of the natural environment, generally defined as being minimally impactful and including providing both contributions to conservation and environmental education. Environmental costs refers to the damage or degradation done to ecosystems, biodiversity, and natural resources, including pollution, habitat loss, and climate impacts. Outweigh means to have greater importance or influence. Now, in theory, ecotourism sounds like a win-win. Tourists enjoy nature, locals benefit economically, and the environment is preserved. But in Jamaica's term, the road to heaven is paved with good intentions. Our team contends that in practice, ecotourism in Jamaica brings serious and often irreversible environmental consequences that exceed its benefits. One of the most direct environmental impacts of ecotourism is the degradation of natural habitats. Jamaica is home to unique ecosystems from coral reefs and mangroves to the Blue and Jonker Mountains National Park, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. However, these ecosystems are fragile. When ecotourism sites attract large numbers of visitors, many of whom lack ecological awareness, they experience increased erosion, pollution, and disturbances to wildlife. In marine areas like the Montego Bay Marine Park and the Negril Marine Reserve, so-called eco driving and snorkeling excursions are damaging coral reefs through boat anchors, trampling, and chemical pollution from sunscreens. Reefs take decades to recover, if they ever do. According to NEPA, coral cover in many parts of Jamaica has dropped significantly in recent years, in part due to increased tourism pressure. The second issue is greenwashing, where businesses label themselves as eco-friendly without following sustainable practices. In Jamaica, many tourist operators advertise themselves as ecolodges or ecotours, but lack certification or oversight. There is currently no national ecotourism standard in Jamaica at the moment. This creates a free-for-all where any operator can use the label eco for marketing. Even if they leave a large environmental footprint, many of these resorts and tours still overconsume water, contribute to habitat loss, and do little to educate guests about conservation. For example, some eco-resorts are built near or within protected areas, displacing wildlife and increasing human intrusion. The absence of consistent regulation makes it easy for developers to push into untouched areas under the banner of ecotourism. For example, off-the-grid hotels may use diesel generators instead of investing in renewable energy sources to power these facilities. This not only contributes to air pollution, but also increases carbon emissions. Other properties may pump untreated wastewater directly into rivers and oceans, harming marine life and polluting local water sources.
Point of information.
Not at this time. Another common problem is when hotels have large pools in water-scarce destinations. Let's talk about the bigger picture, specifically carbon emissions and resource consumption. Most ecotourists travel to Jamaica by air. Aviation is one of the most carbon-intensive forms of travel, contributing significantly to climate change, which ironically threatens the same ecosystems tourists came to admire.
Point of information.
Not at this time. Beyond emissions, ecotourism increased demand for infrastructure, roads, accommodations, waste systems, which put strain on Jamaica's limited natural resources. In ecotourism hotspots, water usage often spikes. Tourists in resort areas use more water daily than the average Jamaican resort. In drought-prone areas like St. Elizabeth and Portland, ecotourism contributes to water shortages that hurt local communities and agriculture. So, while tourists enjoy a natural escape, locals bear the cost of depleted resources, environmental stress. Now, some might argue, but ecotourism helps the economy and raises environmental awareness. Yes, ecotourism can create jobs and bring income, but that does not justify unchecked environmental damage. Economic benefit is not an excuse for ecological destruction. Besides, many ecotourism profits do not stay in local communities. They often go to foreign-owned tour companies or centralized resorts. When ecosystems collapse, local livelihoods that depend on them, like fishing and farming, also suffer. Awareness raising is valuable only if followed by action and regulation, which, as I've shown, is sorely lacking in Jamaica's case. In conclusion, while ecotourism in Jamaica may be wrapped in a green ribbon, its environmental footprint is deep and damaging. Fragile ecosystems are being worn down, regulation is weak, the carbon footprint is high, and the natural resources that sustain Jamaica's communities are being pushed to their limits. We, the proposition, believe the environmental costs are simply too high. Jamaica cannot afford to sacrifice long-term environmental health for short-term economic gain. For these reasons, I'd urge you to support today's motion. Thank you.
All right, so we thank the first speaker on side proposition for a very spirited opening to the debate, and now we welcome the first speaker on side opposition to do likewise. Hear, hear.
Judges, my opponents, friends, well-wishers, and of course to our online viewers, a pleasant morning. We, the opposition, are resolute in our stance that the benefits of ecotourism far outweighs the environmental costs my opponents are trying to sell us. Ecotourism accounts for 7% of global tourism, and we will demonstrate through sustainable and regulated implementation the benefits obtained from ecotourism space, that the benefits obtained from the ecotourism space are more beneficially impactful for the environment than any cost. My opponents mentioned degradation of natural habitats. Now, the International Ecotourism Association, TIES, states that ecotourism fosters environmental awareness and it directly contributes to conservation. For example, the Galapagos Islands enforce strict visitor limits and eco-friendly regulations, ensuring minimal environment impact while funding conservation efforts. Additionally, the global ecotourism market was valued at $295 billion in 2023, and is projected to reach $761 billion in 2030, showing its growing role in sustainable development. Secondly, my opponents would have mentioned the cost of environmental damage and the lack of conservation and preservation. But I must insist that the tenets of true ecotourism do not allow for mismanagement of environment. Rather, it promotes and encourages environmental responsibility, social equity, economic health, and cultural vitality. Ecotourism promotes strict visitor limit protocols, among other conservation practices and incentives to conserve the natural surroundings. What really causes environmental harm are improper regulation of tourism and the lack of implementation of proper policies. The case studies of the success of ecotourism are too much to really give details of, but we would have seen proper implementation and lasting benefits in Brazil, Costa Rica, Kenya, Rwanda, Jamaica, and also Thailand. My teammates and I will outline the environmental benefits of ecotourism, and we will continue to drill home that sustainable ecotourism benefits the environment, community, and the wider country on a whole when managed properly. What would be the alternative my opponents are proposing? Traditional tourism where local communities and lifestyles are displaced, where ecosystems are altered and destroyed with the building of hotels, roads, and other amenities for guests? No, 1,000 times no. We say the benefits outweighs the cost, and with certification from international ecotourism bodies like TIES, Earthchecks, along with the implementation of policies and regulations for management, the impact of the benefit will be even more widespread and have a greater lasting impact. Judges, We will look at environmental benefits that include 1, environmental conservation, 2, preservation of habitats for numerous flora and fauna, 3, promotion of sustainable practices, 4, increase in in education and environmental awareness, 5, diversification and spread of tourist products, 6, the economic benefits, and cultural preservation, to make number 7. Now I'll be looking at the first 4. In respect to environmental conservation, ecotourism relies on the preservation of natural and their many resources. The entrance fees, tour packages, and other charitable donations are used to bolster the funding for wildlife protection, the preservation, and combined existence of many endemic and endangered plants and animals. Examples of this are seen in Rwanda's Park de Volcans, where the park generates $1 million per year, which is used to manage all the country's protected areas. In addition, ecotourism generates revenue that can protect endangered areas from exploitation, promoting sustainable practices, and involving local populations in tourism management. Successful examples include projects in the Ecuadorian rainforest and gorilla conservation initiatives in Africa, Blue and Jankro Mountain National Park here in Jamaica, which have positively impacted both the environment and the local economies. Secondly, ecotourism includes the protection of biodiversity and the preservation of ecosystems through establishment of protected areas, habitat restoration, and the promotion of controlled interactions with wildlife that aim to protect endangered species and their habitats. In Brazil, only 45 of the 1,100 protected areas are engaged in ecotourism, and these 45 use earnings to maintain their sites and other protected areas. So my opponents, would you say that this is a benefit not worth utilizing? I would not think so. Thirdly, the promotion of sustainable practices includes the Never Leave a Trace initiative practiced in numerous ecotourism sites. Visitors are encouraged to dispose of their garbage properly and stick to trails to minimize the impact of their collective footprints. There is also a recycling of resources such as water. My opponents, how would you pay for fresh water when there isn't any? Ecotourism is responsible for many restorations of degraded forest projects and reforestation of areas where deforestation has occurred. Judges, through the conservation, preservation, and promotion of sustainable environmental practice, this has led to an increase in educational awareness among members of the local communities and visitors alike. This environmental awareness spills over their daily lives, which leads to a better future for our planet. Again, the benefits of a sustainable ecotourism product far outweighs the environmental cost, which can be mitigated through proper policy implementation and enforcement, through certifications, through audits, and overall proper management. I thank you.
All right, so we thank the first speaker and side opposition for a stellar opening on that side of the house. And now we will transition into a period of cross-examination. This is where we invite opposition to field 3 questions to proposition, questions limited to 10 seconds and responses capped at 30 seconds, and after which we'll flip the arrangement and have proposition field questions to opposition. So opposition, are you ready?
Yes, we are ready. Would you not say that the impact of traditional tourism has a greater negative impact on the environment?
Thanks for that question. I think you have painted a flawed picture of what our MOOT is. The debate isn't between traditional tourism and ecotourism. The debate is between the trade-off of the risk of ecotourism and the benefits.
All right. So my question to you is, wouldn't eliminating ecotourism force rural communities back into harmful practices?
The alternative we pose is better regulation of ecotourism, not its elimination. So if you listen carefully, we're suggesting these are the issues that they cause, and there are ways and means to mitigate against those issues.
Okay, so if you say that the problem is mismanagement of ecotourism sites, right? shouldn't the focus be to have the regulations and certifications better developed to sustain it rather than only looking at one side of the picture, that there's more harm being done, rather than to enforce regulations to conserve and to better the model that we're proposing?
But thanks for that question, but what evidence do you have to say that you can justify what you're basically saying? Because as we know that in Jamaica, a lot of persons are not compliant as it relates to rules, regulations, and policies, right? So even if there are policies that are enforced, what evidence do you have that they would be abided by?
All right, so we thank side opposition for their questions, and now we invite side proposition to field questions.
All right, so my opponents, I'm going to ask this question. How can we ensure that the revenue from ecotourism is actually reinvested into environmental protection and not just funneled into private or foreign pockets?
Thanks for that question. So with the implementation of the ecotourism activities within areas, they are managed and operated by the individuals within the communities. So whether it's tours, whether it's therapeutic spas, the individuals who are within the communities where the activities are taking place are the ones who carry out the activities and the ones who are paid. And they also are involved in the conservation of the environment because this is where they make their money.
All right, that's time actually. Yeah, so next question proposition.
All right, so even if ecotourism provides funding for conservation, right, isn't it paradoxical to harm nature in order to protect it?
Thank you for that question. Now, if you listen to the model that we're proposing and we'll come to later in our delivery, you'll realize that the model of ecotourism is garnered to protect the environment while still producing optimum output. So therefore, policies and regulations in place would protect the wildlife, which is such as a high value, low value model, where you have a high value attraction and resources being put out with low volume of people as much as possible, which would not affect the environment to degradation statuses.
And final question from side proposition.
All right, so can wildlife truly remain undisturbed when constantly exposed to human presence, even under so-called eco-friendly practices?
So the idea is that the interactions of the individuals will be physical touch or in any way hampered by the individuals who are there. But when you consider the persons who go bird watching, they're not trying to go up close and personal, getting touchy and feely with the animals that are within those areas. It's an appreciation from afar, which is where we ensure that there are strict visitor limits. So you will be able to see what you want to see, but you're not touching or interacting with them in any detrimental way.
All right, thank you teams for a very interesting first period of cross-examination. We now continue the debate and invite the second speaker on side proposition. Hear, hear.
Ladies and gentlemen, honorable judges, good morning. Our first speaker has expertly laid out the various ways in which the cost of ecotourism outweighs the benefits. I will now further expand on this by delving into several examples that categorically prove the position of this side. What is noteworthy is the fact that these examples are countries across the continent, but also include examples right here in the tourist-rich island of Jamaica. Let's begin at home. The Blue and John Crow Mountains National Park is a UNESCO World Heritage Site renowned for its rich biodiversity and cultural heritage. Despite its potential for ecotourism, several challenges have hindered its success. Once relatively isolated, they have seen increased trail erosion, litter, and deforestation due to ecotourism-related infrastructure development. According to the Agricultural Research Program Technical Bulletin Series, with 94% of residents believe ecotourism can enhance their quality of life, only about 1/3 reported financial improvements. The disparity underscores the fact that economic benefits of ecotourism, are often not equitably distributed among local communities. Additionally, there are management and policy gaps. The absence of comprehensive national ecotourism policies and enforcement mechanisms have led to inconsistent development and oversight of ecotourism initiatives. Let's look at another equally popular location, the cockpit country. The cockpit country is also characterized by its unique landscape and rich biodiversity, which has faced significant challenges in balancing conservation and development. While not strictly a tourism issue, proposals for bauxite mining have sparked widespread protests due to potential environmental degradation and disruption of local communities. Additionally, unclear demarcation of the cockpit country's boundaries have complicated conservation efforts and allowed for conflicting land use activities.
Point of information?
Not right now. Again, there's a matter of community exclusion. Local communities have been excluded from decision-making processes, leading to mistrust and resistance to ecotourism and conservation initiatives. In relation to one of our most popular and beloved natural resources, just last week, Thursday, the Chief Public Health Inspector told the monthly meeting of the St. Anne Municipal Corporation that the Duns River Beach and White River have not met recreational water standards in relation to total fecal chloroform counts.
Point of information?
Not right now. Chloroform being a microorganism which indicates contamination. This could indicate the presence of dead or decaying plant or animal matter, or both. Come with me as we go further afield. The Masai Mara in Kenya is intended to use safari tourism to support wildlife conservation and provide income for local Maasai communities. The reality has been quite different. The first issue has been what is called cultural commodification. Tour operators often arrange for tourists to watch or participate in Maasai rituals, for example, jumping dances, which can reduce cultural practices to spectacles. Traditional Maasai dress and customs are used for photo ops, sometimes against the community's wishes. Large safari companies, often foreign-owned, capture most of the profits. Maasai people may only earn through low-paying jobs, example, porters or performers, or token fees for land access. There's also resulting displacement and land use conflict. Wildlife conservation areas sometimes overlap with traditional Maasai grazing lands. Finally, government or private conservatories restrict Maasai movement or force them to alter their way of life. NGOs are now, not right now, NGOs are now promoting more community-based ecotourism where Maasai have ownership and decision-making power. In the Galapagos Islands, Ecuador, they have established ecotourism goals to promote sustainable tourism in one of the most unique and biodiverse systems in the world. It is also intended to use tourism to fund revenue for conservation and scientific research. What has taken place, ladies and gentlemen, is quite different. We have seen environmental degradation where sensitive wildlife, example, marine iguanas, are disturbed by human presence. Boats and ferries increase water pollution and the risk of oil spills. We've seen the introduction, not right now, we've seen the introduction of invasive species. Tourist and cargo ships inadvertently introduce plants and animals, for example, rats, goats, and insects that threaten native species. We've also seen an infrastructural strain. The demand for more accommodations and food supplies have led to overfishing, freshwater shortages, and increased waste management generation on islands with limited capacity, ladies and gentlemen. The undesirable outcome was that UNESCO placed the Galapagos Islands on its endangered list in 2007 due to these issues, though it was removed in 2010 after government action. Lastly, in Costa Rica, ecotourism goals were set as a global model for sustainability by protecting rainforests and wildlife through lodges, canopy tours, and wildlife reserves. In reality, what we have seen is greenwashing, habitat disturbance, and an overdependence on tourism. In 2019, tourism accounted for over 8% of GDP, approximately 600,000 jobs. When COVID halted travel, the economy, and many community reliance on ecotourism suffered significantly. What are we saying? The overarching point here, ladies and gentlemen, judges, is that these aren't theoretical, hypothetical issues promulgated by self-righteous, agenda-driven environmentalists. Instead, as clearly evidenced by this side, these are real-world problems with real-world consequences for locals who depend on natural resources for the land, for their lives and livelihood. Clearly and irrefutably, environmental costs of ecotourism outweighs its benefits. I thank you.
All right, so we thank the second speaker on side proposition and now make welcome for the second speaker on side opposition to continue the debate. Hear, hear.
Good morning, everyone, chief adjudicators, my opponents, my teammates. The proposition brought out some issues that they highlighted as problems faced with the ecotourism activities, which really weren't issues with ecotourism, but with the individuals who were participating in it. So the situation is, you will invite persons within a community like the Blue Mountain and Jonker Mountains, and with them being individuals, they'll say, okay, I want to pick this flower, or I like this butterfly, I want to try and catch it, like our dear swallowtail butterflies. But this is not what ecotourism is about. Ecotourism is about the protection of these environments, the protection of these animals. And ecotourism would be one way that we would be able to reduce the likelihood of, let's say, the country being impacted by mining, because in this current state, we aren't fully utilizing the space with all of the gains that are available to it.
Point of information?
So, go ahead.
How do you separate the issues from the people who create these issues? It seems to be...
So the individuals who are there need to be informed, which is what ecotourism champions. We inform and educate individuals about environmental awareness. And so, let me reiterate our position. Ecotourism benefits outweigh the environmental costs that may be associated with it. Ecotourism is the sustainable way to enjoy another country's culture, scenery, and wildlife while preserving the richness that exists within the area that you're visiting. And I'll be highlighting some additional benefits, like the economic gains that my proposed alluded to, but also the diversification and spread, and the preservation of culture. But let's look at the economic gains. In a survey that was conducted at the Zimbabwean Macedonian National Park, which was published in the Journal of Sustainable Business and Economics, 58.8% of the participants observed an increase in their economic growth of the community. And all the participants stated that their standard of living increased over 50%. Let me say it again. Everyone who participated within that survey who benefits from the intervention of this national park were all able to increase their standard of living over 50%. Hardly any government sees numbers like these, and that's not a lie. This is the same for areas within our own country, like Bath St. Thomas, or many of our rural spaces that we've alluded to, where individuals would be dependent on farming solely, but if they have and if they use these alternative areas for ecotourism, they'll be able to offset those negative effects of climate change, of drought, that would be affecting places like St. Elizabeth in some times. And here's the thing, with that national park in Macedonia, there was no negative effect to the environment observed with the implementation of this park. So where would the environmental cost be? Ecotourism also allows for the diversification and wider distribution of tourist attractions away from the basic sun, sea, and sand, and for the reduction of the impact of traditional tourism on the environment. And I would like to add that to the truest extent, Dolphin Cove and the experience that they have had with the coliform situation is not considered an ecotourism site. That's just a regular tourism site which utilizes national environment. Not at this time. So right here in Jamaica, we see the creation and promotion of national parks, botanical gardens, and tours along heritage trails that emphasize and encourage the visitors to be active participants in the culture. So for example, Treasure Beach, with its community-based offerings, the Black River Safari, which with its flora and fauna activities, and the Bath in St. Thomas, with its therapeutic spa, naturopathic treatments, and nature trails. With eco-center development plans in place, a sustainable type of development can be realized. These offer the more discerning traveler an authentic experience outside of the traditional space and gives the tourists a chance to explore more of a country's natural environment and gather new knowledge along the way. Where is this negative impact on the environment? Thirdly, ecotourism is beneficial in the preservation of culture and heritage, which allows us to demonstrate our wealth of knowledge passed down through history. Our culture is on prominent displays in activities like the Jamaica Heritage Trail, which takes visitors through history, our history, highlighting various sites like the Port Royal, Palisadoes, the Rose Hall Great House. These significant areas that shape our nation and our development. And with areas like the Accompong and Maroon towns here in Jamaica, people are able to see how these cultures are preserved and actually see the value in the heritage and in these cultures that are there. Cultural heritage is a reflection of the society, and its preservation is vital for maintaining cultural diversity, fostering a sense of belonging, and passing down knowledge to future generations. These experiences and interactions help the locals to build a patriotic pride. Where is this negative environmental impact? And here it is. We acknowledge that there may be some cost with the implementation of ecotourism. However, with checks and balances, the implementation of policies ensure the protection of our land, plants, and animal ecosystems. Thank you.
So we thank the second opposition speaker for his submissions, and we will now transition into our second and final period of cross-examination. So there's a next period of cross-examination. Yes. So once again, we'll allow opposition to pose questions to propositions for 10 seconds, and your responses are capped at 30 seconds. Opposition.
Good day, everyone. Our first question is, how do you account for the instances where ecotourism has actually led to preservation of the environment, led to preservation of the forest, led to reforestation, and also bringing in income to low-income communities?
All right, that's time.
On this side, we haven't argued that ecotourism is a bad thing. What we've argued is, on balance, there are risks involved, inherent risks, which must be managed and must be mitigated. We've also argued if that is not done and it runs unchecked, there are risks which we have to factor in, which leads to an imbalance in benefits versus costs.
Okay, so in the spirit of the MOOT, and we're arguing against benefits of economic tourism, if mismanagement is the issue, why not center it around policies and regulations, which we are proposing, instead of saying ecotourism is not good?
All right, so thank you for that question. But what you have to bear in mind that not oftentimes those policies, when they're put in place, they actually work. They do not work. You have to understand that as humans, we tend to go against policies and break laws, so it will not work.
Final question.
Sound like you're trying to get rid of the constabulary force as well, but my final question is then, if your argument of ecotourism applies, shouldn't it be applied to all areas of tourism and all areas of management? Shouldn't it be applied to all humans, seeing that human is a problem as you're proposing?
All right, so that's the final question from opposition. We'll now invite proposition to field their questions.
I just have one question. Why are you trying to compare tourism with ecotourism? Ecotourism is nothing compared to tourism itself. It's a totally different thing.
We haven't tried to compare ecotourism to tourism, but we're highlighting the benefits of ecotourism and how it outweighs the environmental costs, because the environmental costs are or can be mitigated, as well as the benefits can be for the individuals who are participating in it.
Furthermore, based on the from your side, you are mentioning things of traditional tourism and not of ecotourism. So I'm just bringing that clarity for your sake.
Okay, my question to you is that are many ecotourism initiatives poorly regulated, allowing greenwashing, where damaging activities are disguised as eco-friendly, knowing that you had mentioned policies will be put in place earlier?
So just to ensure that we highlight this, 76% of travelers tend to seek destinations that have ecotourism benefits or ecotourism activities. But a part of that is that there is an opportunity of greenwashing. However, regulations and certifications ensure that those things don't occur. So ecotourism isn't the issue in that regard. Ecotourism is a product that needs to be protected, and regulations and certifications will do that.
All right, and the final question from side proposition.
You have outlined a number of benefits of ecotourism, but I have yet to hear any information that disproves the litany of incidents of the negative implications of ecotourism. We mentioned greenwashing and environmental degradation. That has yet to be disproven.
We have given you several examples. We have given you Gapala Islands. We have given you Massa. We will talk about Costa Rica even coming up. However, we would also like to identify that apart from policy and regulations, there is also, we're proposing enforcement, we're proposing audits, we're also proposing implementing fines, we're proposing real solutions to the issue that you're bringing up.
All right, that's time. So before we take the submission from the reply speakers, we're just going to allow you guys a minute break to put the finishing touches on those speeches, and then we will resume with the reply speech from side opposition, and then proposition will close out the debate in totality. All right, so that signals the end of the 1 minute, and we welcome the opposition reply speaker. Hear, hear.
Good afternoon, everyone, adjudicators. Good morning. Oh, good morning, everyone, adjudicators, teammates, my opponents. It's good to all have you here. Sustainable ecotourism is an ever-growing solution that requires implementation of standards, policies, certification, and enforcement. The alternative, judges, is unreasonable mass tourism and further environmental destruction without these policies in place. What my opponents have said today is really considered around mining and tourism and pretty much human beings being human beings, but not around ecotourism policy model. What we are proposing and what we are saying today, that given all that we have heard today, that we firmly believe that ecotourism is a pillar for sustainable development, and the benefits of ecotourism far outweigh the environmental costs. Remember, the intent of ecotourism is garnered and geared towards the conservation, preservation, and sustainability of the environment, not its degradation. Ecotourism is focused on environmental restoration by limiting human traffic while restoring it through conservation efforts, such as replacing corals, even by the very ecotourists in our fish sanctuaries, and the reforestation by even the forest department through the nature treks as they go along. Ecotourism reduces the impact of mass and traditional tourism, as well as that has a far greater negative impact on the environment. Let us once again look at the examples of ecotourism space where the environmental agenda is the focus. Our very own Blue and Junkra Mountains National Park, where the goal is conservation of our endemic species. Ecotourists and local enjoy the park, and fees charged go back into the conservation and sustainable development initiatives. Orocabessa Blue Fees and Alligator Head fish sanctuaries, where the goal is the conservation of marine biodiversity and sustainable fishing. Hence, we currently have the restoration of the parrotfish, which is very useful in the coral reef replenishing. Sandals Foundation, even as an initiative where ecotourists can help replenish the coral reefs. We are saying, Lord, that there are strong policies, such as the high-volume, low-volume tourism policy that has ensured protection of endangered animals, preservation of culture and environment. Currently, 10% of Bhutan Asia GDP comes from ecotourism space, and there are innumerable examples of designated ecotourism space that my colleagues and I have mentioned today, judges, and they are indeed working. Apart from the environmental benefits, you have heard from my colleagues and I the examples of ecotourism spaces where conservation is the focus that is shown in the economic gains of ecotourism. Ecotourism provides income for local communities through job creation. Local fishermen, local guides, restaurateurs all benefit. In Costa Rica, where there's an entire sector built on sustainable ecotourism, earnings from the Aura ecotourism corridor goes back into funding forest conservation efforts throughout the country. Similarly, our own glistening waters in Trelawney. You have the Black River Safari, the Gibraltar Beach in Orocabessa, St. Mary, where funds are used to further advance the conservation initiatives such as mangrove planting, turtle production. Adjudicators, we have also highlighted the cultural benefits of ecotourism. We have said that cultural preservation and vitality is seen in the Jamaica Heritage Trail in community tours of historical Accompong and marine town preservation and infrastructural historical preservations. Everyone, we are strongly ascertaining that environmental degradation cannot be solely attributed to ecotourism. No, cars add to air pollution. Pesticides and other chemicals add to water and soil pollution. Waste from industries, urbanization, mining, factors contributing to a far more greater environmental degradation. Judges, if we do away with ecotourism, many of these areas will probably be exploited for mining or commercial development, far more destructive alternative. Therefore, our solution we are again saying is that these spaces operating under ecotourism umbrella are supposed to be environmental friendly. Let us put policies and implement enforcement actions. Let us ensure that there is certification and periodic audits. Let us ensure that these areas to mitigate any environmental cost. As the Honorable Minister Granger said, Jamaica nice, make we protect with paradise. Thank you.
All right, so we thank the opposition reply speaker for a very interesting closing, and now we invite the proposition reply speaker to do the same. Hear, hear.
Good morning once again, Madam Speaker, honorable judges, esteemed opponents, and valued audience. Now, I just heard my opponent mention that the most honorable Olivia Babsy Grange mentioned that Jamaica nice, let us protect our paradise, but are you guys for that? No. As the final speaker for the proposition, my role is to reaffirm our position, highlight key points, and address any lingering doubts. We open this debate by defining ecotourism as tourism that aims to protect nature and support local communities while minimizing environmental impact. But we have shown clearly and repeatedly that in practice, ecotourism in Jamaica and around the world has failed to live up to this deal. Now, let me recap, or should I say remix, what my team members had said earlier. Our first speaker explained how ecotourism has damaged Jamaica's coral reefs, and we have full evidence when you look at a few years ago when government officials keep warning us that we should leave the parrot fishes alone. Now, mangroves and national parks, despite being marketed as eco-friendly, increased ecotourism leads to pollution, erosion, and disruption of wildlife. Marine parks like Montego Bay and Negril suffer from sunscreen chemicals, anchor damage, and overuse. These ecosystems cannot recover easily some may never recover at all. Now, when you look at greenwashing and weak regulation, as my opponents had mentioned, policies will be put in place. We expose how eco is often a marketing label, and that can be misleading. Not a meaningful standard without national regulation. Any operator can call themselves eco-friendly, even while causing serious harm like using diesel generators, wasting water, or dumping sewage. There's no enforcement and no accountability, my opponents. Carbon emissions and reuse, right? We highlighted the irony that most ecotourists fly to Jamaica, contributing to climate change that directly threatens the natural beauty they come to see once they consume far more water and energy than locals, especially in drought-prone areas. Infrastructure to serve ecotourism puts strain on natural resources and communities. Now, let's journey with me and we'll go into the real world, as they had mentioned some other countries. Our second speaker showed that Jamaica is not alone. Across the globe, from Costa Rica to Kenya, Ecuador to Bhutan, ecotourism has led to cultural exploration, environmental degradation, unequal economic gains, community exclusion. Now, my opponents find it difficult also to realize goal versus reality. Now, even in places once praised as models like Galapagos or Costa Rica, as they had mentioned, unregulated or over-commercialized ecotourism has had serious environmental and social consequences. Now, let us look at economic arguments that are not enough. We acknowledge that ecotourism can bring jobs, yes, but economic benefit cannot justify ecological destruction. Jobs are temporary. Ecotourism collapse is often permanent. And as we've shown, profits too often go to foreign investors, not local communities. When natural resources are degraded, local livelihoods like farming and fishing suffers the most. Human beings execute policies and they may not work. I've visited on numerous sites, right, where persons put up signs to say, do not feed the animals, do not tease the animals, but yet they are being teased. Now, let us look at conclusion. Economic tourism may come dressed in green, but its footprint is large, lasting, and growing. From reef damage to water shortages, from greenwashing to carbon emissions, the environmental costs far outweigh the adverse benefits, especially in places like Jamaica where oversight is weak and ecotourism already under pressure. Now, my opponents have not proved how the benefits will be disproven. We, the proposition, are not against tourism or economic growth because that is good for the country. But we are simply saying that that in its current form, ecotourism causes more harm than good, especially to the environment, which is ironically the very thing it depends on. For these reasons, we urge you to support the motion. And I will close by saying that Jimmy Cliff, in a hit classic, once said, "Save our planet Earth." In the 90s, when I was going to school...
All right, that is time. That is time. We thank the proposition reply speaker for rounding out this debate in fine style.
Let's hear it one more time for the teams, ladies and gentlemen. That certainly was a debate loaded with research, facts, argumentations, and all of that. So I know the judges have a task on hand. But just to remind our audience that we had the Real Estate Board as the proponent and the Cannabis Licensing Authority as the opponent, and they debated the MOOT, be it resolved that the environmental costs of ecotourism outweigh its benefits. We want to keep the conversation going, so for those of you online, are you for or against the MOOT? Just drop it in the chat so we can see where you stand. But the judges will now deliberate, and we will use the opportunity to refresh ourselves, and when the judges return, they will sum up the match and announce the winner of this match. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Well done, teams. So you went to school in
So welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. An interesting and riveting match just unfolded before us, and the motion was, be it resolved that the environmental costs of ecotourism outweighs its benefits. On side proposition, we had Real Estate Board, and in opposition, we had the Cannabis Licensing Authority. So let's get into it. When we are debating a MOOT that speaks about environmental costs of ecotourism outweighing its benefits, then naturally we're going to expect to hear arguments about how exactly is the environment impacted, right? So side proposition rather, started out the debate, and they gave us the definitions of the key terms such as ecotourism, environmental cost, and outweigh, right? They told us that theoretically speaking, when we consider ecotourism, it sounds like a win-win, but in practice, it brings about serious and irreversible consequences. And on side opposition, we get a direct contestation to that idea, because side opposition says that ecotourism in its natural state has certain restrictions and limitations that prevent some of the harms that side proposition rather would claim that exists when we engage in ecotourism. So what were the real key turning points in this match? One of the key ideas that we saw coming out was a sort of convergence on both teams, right? Where both teams were saying there are benefits in ecotourism, and what really should happen is that ecotourism needs greater regulation, right? But in the spirit of this match, side proposition, we want to urge you and to caution you that the motion rather required you to oppose ecotourism as a whole, so in as much as there is benefits, right? And you said that there can be benefits if there's greater regulation where ecotourism is concerned. That necessarily wasn't the best stance to take in the spirit of the motion, because it wanted you to directly state that ecotourism is bad for the environment, right? But you basically took an approach to say, okay, if we regulate ecotourism, the benefits that exists, we can bolster them, which is basically what side opposition is arguing, because that is their stance on the motion, right? So what would have been helpful was for you, in your framing of the debate, to tell us exactly, when you gave us your definition of what ecotourism is, to show us what exactly do you guys on your side consider to be ecotourism, because in the absence of that, another convergence or another convergence that we got in the debate was this issue of ecotourism versus tourism, and there was no clear distinction or demarcation in your framing or in your setting up of the motion. So what, as a panel of adjudicators, what we got was a lot of back and forth on things that are happening in the space, and you claiming it to be ecotourism, but on side opposition, they are claiming that this is just regular mass tourism. So because of that absence of proper framing on the debate, we kind of had this. The major turning point in the debate, in fact, was actually ecotourism versus tourism in and of itself, right? So on side proposition, we got this beautiful argument that one of the greatest dangers of ecotourism is greenwashing, right? And we never got a fully fleshed out mechanization of greenwashing and how exactly it is detrimental for the environment, right? So we got the idea, and we got tad bits here and there, but again, the other arms that you guys would have spoken about or put forward on your team were not one unique to ecotourism, and it exists in the society and in status quo, even outside of the realm of tourism, as was argued by side opposition. So side opposition, they said, okay, we understand that ecotourism exists, and we don't buy the claims that you are proffering about ecotourism, because in and of itself, ecotourism is innately built in to protect the environment and to offer some level of comfort to the environment, right? And there was a lot of arguments where the economics of ecotourism is concerned, and ecotourism in and of itself from an economic standpoint already benefits the locals, because majority of the time it's the local persons that are engaged in the ecotourism, and again, not major foreign players that the money will be repatriated to, which again brings us back to the point of the confusion between tourism itself and ecotourism. So with those things said, as a panel of judges, we felt that a more compelling case was put forward by side opposition, and they would have had this match won with 272 points, and you guys were closely behind with 262 points. The best speaker for the debate was the opposition reply speaker, Mr. Theo Clayton. Thank you very much. I'll now hand over to Aniki to close out.
Thank you very much, Chair Adjudicator. Let's hear it one more time for the teams. So, it's the best of two that will advance to the octafinals. We have Real Estate Board winning one match. We have Cannabis Licensing Authority winning one match. So we're not quite sure who will advance from this match, but by the end of the week, teams, you will know who will advance. But well done. It's been a very good match. And for those of you online, stay tuned. We have another exciting match coming up when TPDCO and PICO will match up at 11:45. Thank you for joining us. You can shake hands and meet each other next round.